What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Mount Rushmore edition of the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast. It is July 4th, so we are going to be talking about the most patriotic wrestlers in pro wrestling history for this edition. And who are we, if you don't know? Well, I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango. Joining me, as always, are Callum Wiggins.
I'm not American.
And Robert E. Fleece.
Yada yada problematic.
Yeah, it's gonna be some of the discussion for sure. I have, normally when we do these Mount Rushmore lists, we do some prep work where we try to, write up like a little bit of maybe like a target list of, okay, well, these are about like good like 5 or 6 names that might be in the discussion. Here's another maybe 10 plus that, or, you can make an argument for. Here's another couple that are in the range, but you're probably not going to lean towards that. There's been editions that we've had 50 some people to talk about, and there's been some where, the list is kind of endless. Like, if we talk about like the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestlers, it's like, all right, well, you can talk about 150 different people or something. But this year and this whole edition, when it comes to this Mount Rushmore, not a whole lot of people to talk about. And that in and of itself is kind of interesting because we haven't had many Mount Rushmores where we've been this limited and had to kind of put the focal point on a smaller group and debate about it. Because normally we can kind of get into, we do like the Mount Rushmore of the big super heavyweights, and we've got Andre and Big Show and Taker and Kane, and we can be like, all right, let's break down like the tall guys. Let's break down the big guys. Let's break down a combo of these. Oh, we could do it by era. We could do it whatever. I've got about 12 names, and I might be forgetting some people. Maybe Rob and Callum might be able to bring up some names too that I don't have on my list. But I kind of already have my Mount Rushmore in mind, and there's some wiggle room, of course. And, we're going to kind of debate. I'm sure somebody's going to be like, I think this person's guaranteed, and other people might be like, it's, a little bit more debate about that. But as we go along here and we give you our thoughts about this, we, of course, want to know what you have to say. So drop your thoughts in the comments below on YouTube. If you are not on YouTube, of course, then, tweet something out if you haven't already passed your limit, because that's the thing that's going on these days. And, of course, if you are on Facebook or on the page on smarkoutmoment.com or whatever it is, just chime in with your thoughts. But if you are over there on YouTube, make sure you're hitting the like button, make sure you're hitting the share button, the subscribe button, ring that little notification bell, get those same access things from the join button as you would get on the Patreon. So you got the Darkcast tier, the Pick Your Poison tier, whatever it might be. And if you, of course, are interested, I'm saying, of course, a lot on this. I just realized that. Maybe that's my word for the day, my words for the day. The Darkcast is going to be coming up pretty soon. We're going to be setting up some stuff where we're kind of pre-recording some stuff a little bit in advance for the next couple weeks. We're going to talk about the Heat of the Moment tournament, among possibly some other things. So if you want to know how we get to that bracket and all, you can only get it through the Darkcast. And of course, oh my God, I am saying of course too much. Let's get it out of my way. Redbubble and TeePublic for merchandise. Now, Mount Rushmore. If we're going Mount Rushmore of USA Pride or patriotic pro wrestlers or however you want to frame it, the first one that I immediately think of, and I think that pretty much everybody would, and it's stupid not to just talk about him right out of the gate, is Hulk Hogan. The guy's theme is called Real American. The guy went by this whole American Pride thing in more ways than one. He had an entire WrestleMania main event built around that. He went by the name of Mr. America at one point. I don't know if you could necessarily prove it. I got a feeling it's probably the same guy. Hulk Hogan is synonymous with that. And he is, you can kind of play around with the idea like, okay, Real American wasn't even his original theme song and all, but I think that he's as close of a lock as you could possibly get.
Yeah, I can't really disagree. Don't really have much more to add about that. He's was always marketed as the the spirit of Americana, as Vince would always put it. So, yeah, I don't think that there's anybody that embodies the more patriotic side of wrestling than Hulk Hogan.
I mean, there was a guy called the Patriot, and even he doesn't come anywhere near close to being what Hulk Hogan was. It's so silly now when we look back on it and think about how much of it all was built around USA, rah rah, but at the time that was a very strong sentiment in America. And they did sort of just take, our issues with Russia and make Nikolai Volkov a star just so Hogan can beat him. And they did sort of, take the over-commercialized Gulf War and add to it. But at the end of the day, that's what everybody associates Hogan with, to the point where that iconic WrestleMania 7 poster, which might be on the thumbnail for this Mount Rushmore, was just parodied this year by Cody Rhodes, because so much of that Americana marketing was strung with Hogan. And yeah, he's a lock. I don't even think this might be the fastest we've ever done something like that. But yeah, he's obviously on the Mount Rushmore.
I'm trying to find this this Cody parody. I don't think I had seen that.
You want to just finish the story?
Was it the whole thing with him like carrying the American flag and all?
Yeah, it's him with the flag, and there's a pharaoh, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm not seeing any kind of posters of. Oh wait, okay. It's like a cartoon of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I see it. I mean, that's the center point of the thumbnail that I've got going on here. So it's, that shouldn't be that much of a shock. But when it comes to Hogan and that American pride thing, keep in mind, everybody, yada yada problematic, like Rob said at the beginning of this. We're
both America and Hogan.
Yeah, I mean, more ways with, especially the way that things are going down these days. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be celebrating today. The goal here for this Mount Rushmore isn't the 4 best in-ring competitors that happen to be exhibiting the American spirit. It's the 4 that are the best representations of that type of persona or gimmick or character or just entity in general. So yeah, like, of course, if we're talking about like the best in-ring competitors, Hogan's name pretty much will never come up. And if we're talking about like, well, he's had some issues with like saying some problematic things or doing some things that are awful. Yeah, we're not judging based off of that. We're judging based off of how his history in pro wrestling revolved around that Americana. And that goes in a lot of different ways too. It's not just the fact that he was waving around the American flag at the end of a WrestleMania and wiping his bloody face on it, which I always thought was kind of like a little bit of like, maybe you shouldn't do that. But then again, I'm not an authority on that subject, so maybe, I don't know, it's not the same. But even
that Hulk Hogan doesn't bleed red, white, and blue.
I mean, we've seen him at least bleed red. I haven't seen the white or the blue yet. If we're talking about that, I mean, Blue Bloods. Let's get Triple H in there. Maybe. He also is very good of that whole like American spirit type thing when it comes to just commercialization and like trying to break out into the pop culture zeitgeist of the moment and all. I think that Hogan is kind of the benchmark of this. And the other 3 that we put on here are in his shadow. Nobody really tops Hogan for this list. But when you start talking about that and you get into Nikolai Volkov and Iron Sheik and these characters that were built around, that guy isn't from here. And that was like the only reason to boo him back in the day. The easy foreign fanatics type angles where all they have to do is say that they're from another country and that they like it. And people are like, boo, you're awful because you're French, or you're awful because you're from Iran, or whatever it might be. There's even something to be said about like a Bruno Sammartino or a Bob Backlund. those guys were champion for years on end with this. I don't know if you want to say it's like subtle. It's not really that subtle idea of like kind of the American pride of like, you know, Bruno Sammartino being like, oh, he's a New Yorker. He's an American guy. He's here for that, you know, working his way up the American dream kind of challenge. Do you guys think that there's any ground to be like to putting a Sammartino or a Backlund in here?
Not for Sammartino, and quite frankly, not for Backlund either. But Backlund was more pitched to be the All-American boy. Like, you literally might as well have just been Opie.
Yeah, I mean, he not only looked like him, but yeah.
Like, so I don't know if that's like the strongest patriotism you have there, but I do think that there is something there that even before Hogan, they were looking for that rah Americana in the New York territory.
I mean, the guy, he ran for president, right? He's got to get some points
the governor
there.
of Minnesota.
I mean, what about Ventura?
He never really portrayed Americana like that, but like, yeah, one could argue it is real life. Different story.
Oh, the facts, as he would say. They are not the go-to names. They're, for anybody who's wondering, like, is this Hogan, Sammartino, Backlund, Ventura? Is that Tony's Mount Rushmore? No, it's not. These are just three names that kind of came into my mind about, like, if we were to do this Mount Rushmore list 10 years ago, we would have some different names. 20 years ago, we'd have some different ideas of who values one more over the other. You go back in time enough where Hogan is like at his peak, and it pretty much is these guys because there's not all these other examples that we're going to be talking about.
I mean, if we did this in the late 80s, one of the names we'd have to bring up, and might even be the closest to usurping Hogan in terms of Americana is literally his gimmick. You got to talk about Jim Duggan.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan is definitely on my list of the very, very close, if not lock types of characters, because he made a career out of, for a guy that calls himself Hacksaw, he made a career out of two props, a 2x4 and an American flag. Never a hacksaw that I can remember, but he would just, people chanted USA for Duggan more than they chanted Duggan. You watch an old Hacksaw Jim Duggan match, whether it's from 2007 or it's from 1980 something. There's less of like a Duggan, and it's more USA. The guy was a football player that transitioned into pro wrestling, and I don't even know when the transition happened for him to become like a USA Patriot character. Because I don't remember that being as much of a thing when he even won the Royal Rumble, right?
Well, no, the minute he arrives in WWF, he is presented as somebody who just loves America, and he's going to stop that damn Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. We will not hear the Soviet national anthem. He was always presented like that in WWE, but that wasn't a part of his character beforehand. And obviously, just like Hogan from 84, 85 is a lot different from Hogan 89, 90 in terms of they become caricatures. Duggan literally just became, all right, guys, USA, like 2 seconds into the match. And that's when it really grew.
It's a little bit of a blind spot for my fandom of like pre-Royal Rumble Duggan. I can't tell you much about any of his feuds or anything, so...
So I was gonna wait for this, but as I realized that the bulk of the conversation has been you and I, Tony, I have to ask Callum, from a perspective, your perspective and the perspective of the rest of the world, do these characters mean jack shit to you? I mean, do you think of patriotism in any way? Like, what's that like for you?
Oh, I've got zero patriotism for anything. I don't feel like I need to be blindly loyal to the country that I was miraculously born in, that I could have been born in any other country or area of the world, and I don't feel like I should be indebted to that country.
Good man. That's the right answer.
Now, like, do I do these basic things of like, do I cheer when the England football team is playing? Yeah, of course I do, because I feel like there is still a camaraderie among the people that you share, inhabit the same island or state or city or country that you're in, and like there is that desire to have that collective sense of belonging and feeling that you are attached to people in a world which is like so disparate and distant. If there's a couple of things that can bring people together, and seemingly at least most people in a positive way, then I'm all for it. But I don't feel like I should be. There's definitely nothing about the way that my country is run, and in particular, that doesn't give me any real sense of pride. Do I tend to lean more towards like the British wrestlers? Probably I do, because I just feel like there are representatives, and so in a way, so it kind of feels like you want to get behind them, or you want them to succeed because they represent a part of the culture that you're part of, and so to see their success, you almost see it as like a extension of your own success, especially if for the most part that's like, I know that's a psychological construct, which is a symptom of inferiority, but most people have that because most people don't actually achieve jack shit in their lives, present company included. So I think that I understand the message's patriotism, and I understand wanting to support people who I think are bastions of good within my country, but I'm not going to get super behind someone who's there just waving a British flag about all over the place. And like, I like them because they're good wrestlers. That has to be good wrestlers. Like, I'm a big fan of William Regal and Will Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr., and not so much about, I don't know, I'm trying to think of just
literally just, he's got the Union Jack, folks.
Yeah, I mean, I never got super behind Davey Boy Smith, but then again, he's like a bit before my era. But like Nick Aldis, I don't really have a lot of patriotism or like enjoyment towards Nick Aldis. He's like, okay, he's a decent talker and a decent wrestler. It's like, but that's kind of all it extends to for me. Like, I wouldn't want him to be beating every other person that I like just because he's British. The ones that I do like are primarily because they're great wrestlers, and the added bonus is that they are from the same country as me. So especially when you talk about like American patriotism, that doesn't mean anything to me whatsoever. Like, I'm not going to cheer or be interested in a particular superstar because they represent a country that I'm not even from.
I was talking
I'm one that I mainly don't like either.
I was talking to Caroline the other day about how funny it is that people cheer for things based off of like their relative location, and that their scope changes. So it'll be like, let's say like today's Independence Day, like the movie Independence Day. It's the whole world against those aliens because we're all from Earth. But then you get into like the Olympics, and then it becomes, but I'm from America, so go America and screw the other countries. And then once you keep something within America, then it becomes like, oh, well, I'm from New York instead of from Michigan, so screw those Michigan people. And then you go, but I'm from Brooklyn instead of Queens, so screw them. And then you go from, well, I live on 3rd Street and they're on 4th Street, so fuck those guys. Those guys are animals over on 4th Street, and then that was always funny to me in any context. Like, I don't remember the show it was, but it was like some reality competition show, like The Mole or, of course that's the go-to I go with, where nobody would be like, oh, I remember that show. But I remember even my dad watching something, and he was like, oh, I want that guy to win because he's from around Philly. And that was like the closest to around us. And I was just like, but like, what kind of personality does he have? And he's like, I don't know, but he's around Philly, so I want that guy to win.
I'm rooting for him.
And I've never understood that. So there's like a mistranslation that comes with this American pride, rah-rah pro wrestler thing for me that like I wouldn't inherently be cheering for them either, depending on what the circumstances. And I guess it's good that, we're not from the era where that was more heavily prominent. Because I would assume that would probably apply to you too, Rob, right?
Yeah, because I mean, you get that whole like, oh, but it's New York, and especially with New York, because there's nothing like New York, which I'm sure you've now grown accustomed to, Tony, where it's like, oh, that's New York, and we're basically our own country. Don't say I'm an American, I'm a New Yorker. Ah.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, so yeah, I had that all growing up, and especially growing up for me, it was, post 9/11, where it was very, the nationalism was probably at an all-time high. But I did want to get that aspect of it in there of like, okay, what does patriotism mean to someone who's, not from the States, and someone who probably gets a little sick of our constant need to market everything in that way.
Don't get me wrong, like, we're a country that still prides itself on the monarchy and stuff that doesn't exist that was relevant like a couple of centuries ago, but is only now just a tourist attraction pageantry act. We do our fair share of this patriotic bullshit, and as I say, I temper it to the things that interest me. So yeah, I'm a big sports fan, so I will probably, like, in most instances, lean towards a British guy over over someone else from outside of the UK. But then again, if the UK guy's an asshole, like a Tyson Fury, then I'll probably cheer the other guy beating the shit out of them in the ring or whatever. Like, it's all relative.
You're gonna root for England in the World Cup, but at the same time, just because Dave Taylor is from the UK doesn't mean he's your favorite wrestler.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to Duggan, I think that there's, again, we've talked about, like, the level of quality and all that does factor in some way for Mount Rushmores, even if it's not necessarily like the best in-ring competitors or something. So Duggan is somebody that I don't think I'd put him on a lot of Mount Rushmore lists, but this is something that he is within that range for. He never really accomplished a ton of things. He won the Royal Rumble, he won the United States Championship, which that in and of itself is maybe a little bit, but plenty of people have won the United States title that aren't even American or didn't make that like a part of their gimmick and all. But Duggan's a solid name that I don't know if I would lock him in, but he would be in the discussion for me.
I mean, you don't want to forget the time that he turned Canadian.
Yeah, fuck WCW, man. Like, oh, so stupid.
There's more than one example of that on this list too. That's what's funny. So let's talk about another one of those guys, and somebody who did get a desertion character in there. Sergeant Slaughter. Now, does he get disqualified because he was an Iraqi sympathizer for a little bit?
What? He was an Iraqi sympathizer like he was a Marine. It's fine.
No, he obviously, once they start going heavy-handed into the Sergeant Slaughter gimmick, is very much just this military general type. Well, sergeant, not general. He's built around.
Get your facts right.
He's built around the whole American military concept, and there's something to be said about a guy that is a G.I. Joe character.
Yes, sir.
That's something that, that Hacksaw Jim Duggan can't quite say in the same breath.
You think he had to ask Cobra for permission to use the Cobra clutch? Look, Slaughter's fine. I don't know if I'll put him on the Mount Rushmore because there are some later stage people that we have to get to. But he's definitely somebody you immediately associate with the, the flag. And I think if you believe his story, he came up with the idea of the entrance music and all that. And Vince McMahon Sr. said that's the greatest thing I've ever seen, son, or whatever. But like, he's a pioneer. I just don't know if I'd put him on the Mount Rushmore right now.
I think a country that's so heavily tied to its military and the patriotism is very closely tied in with its military. I think that he's definitely a heavy contender for it from my perspective. Just because even though he himself is not a true Marine or a soldier, he does have his connotations are tied into the love that the USA has towards the people that protect them. So I think that has something going for it.
He would be closer of a lock to me than Duggan, I think. But both are kind of around the same range. And there are some big heavy hitters that we still haven't talked about. So I would put them in like that temporary kind of range. We can group these two together, I think. But I think one very much, of course, overtakes the other one. One's called the American Dream, and the other one's the American Nightmare. Cody Rhodes, Dusty Rhodes. I think, of course, Cody not only just being a derivative of Dusty in that fashion of like, he wouldn't have called himself the American Nightmare if his father wasn't the American Dream. I think we could pretty much rule Cody out entirely, right?
I mean, he wears the flag on his neck. Count for something.
But if you're going to put... if you're going to put one of them on the list, I don't think I would put two of them on the list by any means. But if you put one of them on there, it's Dusty.
If you're going to put one of them, yeah.
Because
Dusty's a very different type of patriot.
Mm-hmm.
In that the other ones, I mean, not so much. To be fair, like, he's closer in line with Duggan probably in that he has that everyman character to him.
Yeah.
In that he's not a hulked up. There's obviously Hulk Hogan, but like a very jacked, like powerful representation of like basically the epitome of what our country stands for. But he's more like, hey, you could beat this guy on the street, but he's still going to kick your ass. And he's just he has that the common man, blue collar approach that I think a lot of people see. I mean, he's the embodiment of what people encapsulate the American dream of, like starting from nothing and building your way up to achieving what those who had a better start in life than you, Matt, could just do easily. Like to reach that level, to reach the pinnacle of whatever profession you're in from humble beginnings is, it's the premise that America is built upon.
So I don't know if this will make sense when I say this, but where Hulk Hogan represents the commercialization and the pipe dream of what America stands for, Dusty Rhodes is more of a slice of Americana, and there's more of an authenticity to it. That's at least how I would differ the two, because it wasn't like Hogan. He wasn't walking around, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but he was as American as you could possibly get. And honestly, from just something we've discussed so far, I think I'd have to put him over Slaughter and Duggan.
I would be more inclined to make him a lock because of that idea. I mean, not only is he has the nickname the American Dream, so that gives him some bonus points too, but his gimmick is very much, the idea of kind of like what I said about, like, San Martino is supposed to represent this, like, the immigrant moving over and working his way up through the American dream. I mean, Dusty Rhodes is the average guy who would be like, hey, in America, I can work my way up and I can become a success because of our great country and blah, 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 blah. He did have some very, like, pro-patriotic type, like, promos and, he wasn't decked out in the American flag. He had the polka dots in WWE instead of having, the American flag on his ass or something like that. But that doesn't mean you are less of that type of a character just by not having the flag draped around your neck or wearing a bandana with that. Because then if we're going in that fashion, then we'd be bringing up like, well, the Undertaker had the American flag inside of his coat. What about that? And it's like, no, he's not going to be on this list.
That's not why I would bring up the Undertaker, but he might come up. Think about the fact
More
that the entire biker gimmick was, yeah, I'm Big Mark from Texas and I love America.
I would vote way more other people into that fashion if you're just getting into that.
I would as well, but if you're going to bring up the Undertaker, I'm not bringing him up because he opened his coat in 93 and there was a flag.
It's so weird, though. That stands out to me. It's one of those moments. It's just like, even as a kid, I was just like, wait, what? What are we doing here? But there are plenty of people that are in that kind of range. Let's get into some of these other names that I don't think we're going to have as much to talk about, but like, some people would argue the Steiner brothers should be mentioned.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't really either, but I saw them on a list of like other people's lists of like top 10 American Pride type things. And
well, yeah, because they were also on that same Survivor Series team that we just mentioned with the Undertaker and Code and all that, but I wouldn't.
I remember with one of the cringiest things that's actually, I like to think if I was American, I would have felt cringy about this, but you never know with how you would have been brought up. But
never count out the people that think that those cringy things are actually awesome.
Yeah, that whole debate they did on an episode of Raw between him and Muhammad Hassan. Was it Muhammad Hassan? It wasn't Muhammad Hassan because Hassan wasn't there, but it was
La Resistance.
Yeah, it was. La Resistance, and he brings up all about this, like, all this 9/11 stuff, and it was it wasn't La Resistance. Yeah, it was Chris Nowinski. It was Chris Nowinski.
Oh, okay.
It was like because they were pushing the idea that he was obviously a Harvard graduate, so they had like a spirited debate on television where Nowinski was being a bit more, nuanced in his approach to patriotism and stuff like that, and Steiner was like, yeah, but we're America and we're gonna fuck up the Muslims and all that. Yeah, so
for any of the kids, if there are kids listening, God, I hope not, but if there are kids listening, there was a time, really, I know Family Guy did that bit, but the whole 9/11 was bad. Yeah, like that was really culture for a while.
And way more than just pro wrestling. You saw plenty of movies that came out around that time that were just milking that. You saw, obviously, like the sales of like American flag memorabilia was like skyrocketing around that. And there's good things that come with that, and there's bad things. There's good of people being like, maybe I'm going to stop being an asshole to the people that are right near me because I can kind of see that idea of like, we're all in this together, we're all humans, and then the same people go, but fuck the humans from the other country, and you're like, fuck, you know what I mean?
But all that to say, no, the Steiners wouldn't be anywhere near my Mount Rushmore.
Not even close to me. For that matter too, even when we talk about like the idea that the theme was created for them, I don't think of the US Express just because I forget that they exist most of the time. So like, to me, if you say Mike Rotunda, I never, ever, you can tell me that 250 times in a row and say, what are you picturing right now? I'm picturing IRS. I don't picture the US Express. But if you go into the IRS, I mean, what's more American than completely screwing everybody over and going, wait, so I'm paying sales tax on something, and then the person who earns the money for that pays income tax for it, and then they give that to somebody, and then they pay tax on it as a gift. And that, wait a minute, why are we paying tax 15 times? Like,
No, I think if Barry Windham didn't leave, maybe we'd be talking about the U.S. Express as this great Americana tag team, but I don't think anybody really thinks about them.
What about Ezekiel Jackson or Wade Barrett?
I'm sorry?
This is one of those old school things that I always thought was hilarious, so I bring it up any opportunity I get. There was an Ezekiel Jackson and Wade Barrett match that happened on SmackDown one time for the Intercontinental Championship, and the crowd started chanting USA. And it was like, who the fuck are you cheering for?
Between the English guy and
South African.
South African. Yeah. But people have done that plenty of times. I mean, there's been, Bret Hart matches where people have chanted for USA, and it's like, he's not.
Oh, yeah, they
Bret
did it
Hart's
for,
wrestling,
it was
yeah.
La Resistance versus Chris Benoit and Edge. And they're all Canadian.
Yeah, it's so dumb. And technically, Kane was not born in America, but people chanted USA for him too. Obviously, those are not on the list.
I bet a lot of people wish that he never came to America now.
At this point, it may be. Yeah, something to be said about that, which should maybe be a good transition to talk about JBL.
Well, we're going to talk about JBL. I think we're talking about JBL specifically to talk about some of the problematic elements of patriotism, wrestling, all of it. JBL securing the border is one of the most offensive things in hindsight, but probably the thing that sold the Bradshaw character to a lot of people at that time. And I don't know, man. Bradshaw, like the person, probably one of those patriotic people you can have, but the character probably represents the worst of it all.
But that is where a lot of people's ideologies come in, because if we're talking the people behind the scenes, yeah, he would be in that range because he is somebody who is instrumental in, for instance, the tribute to the troops. So that is very pro-America, very much American pride, all that, all the quote unquote positives that go along with that. But for certain people, the type of character that he portrayed on the air, which I'm sure some of the things that he was saying are things he believes, and some of the things are just, turn up the volume like they are with other types of characters. Some people, they're like, hell yeah, man, that's a real American, is the one that's, like you said, like the border thing. And some people would honestly praise the idea that he did the whole Gestapo walk on that live event. Because keep in mind, American pride doesn't mean all just, the type of thing that you would see like as like a hero role in whatever. A lot of shitty Americans out there. Just look at how our elections go. We don't want to get too deep into politics right now and, what your own personal preferences and stuff. I think pretty much people know where the three of us stand on a lot of political issues if you've listened to the podcast over a while. But some people would be like, hell yeah, man, JBL is my guy for most patriotic type of wrestler because he's the only one that says what you should be saying and all. I would not put JBL in the Mount Rushmore, partially because I do think that there are better ideas. Like I would more so put Hacksaw, Slaughter, American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and Hulk Hogan in there before JBL. But I also just wouldn't feel all that comfortable putting him in there because of those kind of opinions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he wouldn't be my pick whatsoever. But I do think it's important to talk about some of those elements. Because again, a lot of that rose from this time, this post 9/11 hyper nationalism, and JBL is a bit of a scumbag because he's actually just sitting at the border and saying, yeah, go back and tell all your friends that there's new border patrol in town. And I don't know. I think I can see the argument, but I wouldn't feel comfortable putting him on there.
He's an interesting character in this regard because it's the occasion that one of the rare occasions where American patriotism is positioned as the heel in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And the other real big example of that in WWE is Jack Swagger and Zeb Coulter. And the thing that binds those two together is that at the time the world champion was Mexican, or in Eddie Guerrero's case, Mexican American. And so it seems that when the babyface, even if you want to call Del Rio at that point in time a babyface, I know that's a bit of a stretch, but that's what he was positioned as. But when they are not of a culture associated with the USA or immediately celebrated as part of the USA, then the patriotism is turned on its head, and then that character becomes the bad guy because they push a narrative of trying to get those people out of the country, or those people should not be positioned there, and Americans should be on top. So it's always like a balancing that, like, there's the difference between the babyface American patriot who just thinks that America is the best, but isn't, I guess in Hogan's case, he was anti-Iraqi, but then again, everyone in the USA was anti-Iraqi at that point.
It was okay because everybody was.
Yeah.
Yeah, different times. They could approach things through that kind of lens.
Yeah. Whereas when Eddie Guerrero is your super popular babyface champion, then being a patriot that wants to kick all Mexicans out of the country, makes you a heel instead. So yeah, it's always a different approach. Like it all comes down to who you're pushing as the babyface at the time. And realistically, you could probably do a lot of, not the same degree, but you could probably do a lot of what Jack Swagger and JBL were doing, and with a different champion at the helm, could reposition them as babyfaces.
Oh yeah, I mean, even the Swagger Del Rio example, there wasn't as much of like, oh, boo, Jack Swagger, because Del Rio was Del Rio. So a lot of people were just like, I mean, Swagger's a heel, but at the same time, he's kind of a babyface because Del Rio is and then it would be like, it's one of the reasons why that feud didn't work. One of the many reasons why that feud didn't work.
I don't think it was a heel babyface thing. I think just everyone didn't care about either of them. So that was it was just an apathy towards both of them for the most part.
That's what I mean, though. It wasn't like, well, I'm not the biggest fan of the in-ring work, but the characters are good, or like, well, there's a clear-cut babyface and heel, and I don't really like the feud, but I'm going to cheer for the champion because the other guy's being a bigot, or people just, the apathy led to that being like the American patriotism type aspect to it just didn't matter for a lot of people. And then sadly, a lot of people probably were just like, well, I'm going to go for Swagger because I'm that type of person, and if we're talking about something that doesn't work, a character that's not getting this kind of thing over, Lacey Evans. She's tried to tap into that a couple times, and out of all the people on this list that were able to find success through just being like, I was born in America, I'm going to wave the flag, Lacey's got her military career, and she had kind of a little bit of that like American dream type thing about like, well, I grew up with these kind of challenges and I overcame them, and I'm a strong mother and all this that you would think would be very like American dream. Like, let's support this woman, and nobody cares.
Lacey Evans is an example of, imagine taking the Bradshaw character we just discussed, trying to make it sympathetic, but the real person keeps getting in their own way. So it's just like nobody wants to hear this. It's unfortunate too, because I actually think it could be a strong character for Lacey, but like now is not the time, and no one's really interested.
This climate is not the time to be very pro-American babyface, because you can't please everybody. Like, this country is in a huge divide on a lot of issues, not just like one or two issues where you can avoid like
every important issue.
Like, realistically speaking, Lacey's not going to go out there and cut a babyface or heel promo about something like abortion, because why would you bring that up in pro wrestling? It's happened in pro wrestling. We've had people punt babies and stuff, but it's not something that would come out on a regular basis or in a kind of natural way. But when you talk about everything from just like every aspect of the economy, every aspect of every social issue, everything is very touchy these days. So they could not pull off a character like Lacey. If Lacey was better on the mic, she still couldn't pull it off. Because how do you go out there, cut a promo about like, what's something that's like a big hot topic right now? Like, say like trans rights. If she said she was for or against any single aspect of that, you're going to get a portion of the crowd that's going to think that she's the biggest monster in the world. You can't do it right now. Now is not the time to do this type of character.
But they tried, and I think it hurt Lacey. I didn't see anything wrong with her kind of pinup girl character. I didn't think it was the best, but I thought, it worked for her.
She had a lot more flexibility to do that, but it ran its course, and it kind of just became like, well, okay, well, nobody's really caring. In the same way that plenty of other people are just a person that's wrestling. And you take Lacey Evans with her athleticism and her looks and her backstory and all, if you put Lacey in like the 80s, my God, she's the champion and all.
Yeah. Kind of like
she'd be the female Hulk Hogan.
The one character from Glow. Not Alison Brie, but the best friend.
The Liberty Bell.
Liberty Bell, yeah. There you go.
Since she was Zoya the Destroyer. That's a good show, man. That shouldn't have gotten canceled. But Liberty Bell type of character, yeah, it would be massively popular. 2000s plus, past that kind of rah-rah 9/11 type nationalism. Maybe don't do that now. And I think it's kind of the death knell for Lacey Evans in WWE. I don't know if she's going to be able to bounce back from this because she's tried a couple different takes for it and none of them have worked for not even like a 2-week period. So that's a failure. There are still some people that are massively successful though, either despite that or
failures. Lex Luger.
So it's funny. There's the US Express. So let's talk about the Lex Express.
Let's take out the failures. And I think I almost feel compelled to say he's in the discussion just because his whole main event push was built around Americana. But I think he's also just seen as the example of a major swing and a miss from the WWE. And as a result, it's seen as one of the jokiest characters ever.
Which, he had a measure of success just from the idea of the narcissist angle. Like, he's just a muscular, chiseled out of stone type of person. There you go. That's the end of it. They did have a measure of success with the Lex Express thing. Like, he was over with the crowd, but they botched it.
Yeah, they didn't pull the trigger. And I mean, it's not his fault, but it is also, you're asking fans to accept a lot. Even though I think in hindsight, being an adult, it's funnier. He's a narcissist and he's a huge. You don't give a shit about anybody but himself. But if you mess with the country, now we got a problem, mister. It's some of that stuff is fun to look back on, but ultimately, he was fucking Lex Luger. Why do you just let Lex Luger be Lex Luger? Like, he was never going to be a replacement for Hogan. And I think that's why he's always going to be seen as a failure.
Because that's ultimately what they tried to do. And, I mean, it was transparent even back then, I'm sure, for people that was a time frame when I was young enough that I, obviously I wasn't, running a website or anything back then that didn't exist and I was too young. But I'm sure if I would have been at least a teenager or around that time frame, I would have been like, oh, they're just trying to do Hogan. And, by the time you get around to WrestleMania 12 or WrestleMania 15 or whatever, even as a teenager, I would look back on the Lex Express angle and I would look back on the Yokozuna feud and I was like, oh, they didn't have Hogan around that time frame, so they wanted another Hogan, it failed, and they went back to Bret. But in another timeline, in another dimension, whatever you want to call it, Lex beats Yoko, not by count out, but he just flat out wins the championship that time, and maybe Lex Luger becomes a massive success in a way. Maybe he becomes one of those major Americana type wrestlers. As it is, no.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
You can't make an argument in my mind that you can put Luger on this list over a Sergeant Slaughter even.
Would you like to add anything to the Lex Luger discussion, Cal?
He is one of your favorites, right?
There's not really much to add. Like he got super over for a short period of time as an American that slammed a Polynesian American guy pretending to be Japanese. I mean, it seems like it's so crazy about that because it's like this to stand the guy who was pretending to be Japanese. Like Japan happened 50 years ago for the US. It's like that was way past. Like why was like Yokozuna being Japanese a bad thing?
Right. There wasn't anything about his character that like
was particularly villainous.
Like if you really think about it, him being, when they would pretend that he was Japanese, and then eventually it was kind of like the subtext was like, well, he doesn't have to be Japanese. He could, Yokozuna's a term used for like champion over there for that type of wrestler. It doesn't mean Japanese, but Mr.
Like,
Fuji,
damn Mr. Fuji,
like Mr. Fuji carried around the flag and all that stuff. Like they tried to tap into that, of course, but him just being from there, it wasn't like his promos were like, I'm this big champion Yokozuna sumo wrestler and I hate America. He was just a big dude who won a championship. Good for him.
You know what? That you say that. But I know that Kenzo Suzuki loves America. Any thoughts on Kenzo Suzuki?
Didn't even have him on my list.
Because you said hates America, that popped into my head. That made me laugh. Like that was funny to me at 11 years old.
B tier, Mount Rushmore.
Let's talk about a serious one that probably should go on the Mount Rushmore. John Cena. John
Cena is very, very much in that discussion.
I think John Cena is the closest you can get to the rah USA without him always needing to storm around with the flag like he would at times. But to me, he announced to a building of people that
I was going to bring it up if you didn't.
That's the most Americana thing I've probably ever seen in wrestling. Where he announced at the end of Extreme Rules 2011 that the U.S. had caught Osama bin Laden, and it was just like this genuine, like, holy shit moment. Because remember, smartphones aren't much of a thing yet, so a lot of people are just finding out for the first time through John Cena, who just won the WWE Championship from The Miz.
It is kind of weird that, like, they're not like tuning into CNN or checking MSNBC or whatever, news station that they're like, oh, we caught and compromised, I think was the phrasing that he had used.
Caught and compromised to a permanent end. Osama bin Laden.
Which, in some people's minds, that would be the best way that they could possibly hear that. It'd be like, fuck yeah, John Cena retains his championship and we killed him. Like, those people were probably like, I'm going to buy a fucking t-shirt now. Oh my God, And
like, look, I was being from New York during the time. It was sort of like this, like, moment. It was also a moment where I realized that a lot of time had passed and people were kind of like, what the fuck are you celebrating? But it was probably one of the most important moments of his career where how many people get to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think Cena's up there for not only that, for just so much. Like, he kind of is all that is positive about this country or about what this country's supposed to be. And he's also Peacemaker. I think
that is it's outside of wrestling, but Hogan being outside of pro wrestling for some of his movie roles still influenced pro wrestling. So
yeah, I think it's a positive. And I think John Cena should probably be on the Mount Rushmore.
And his work through the tribute to the troops type stuff. The guy did wear camo quite often.
I mean, he did the Marine and then adopted that salute. I think.
Yeah, that the salute alone is like, you're not doing that without some kind of American kind of energy behind it. And the Marine movie, yeah, for that matter, we're not going to put the Miz on the list.
Yeah, I was
The
gonna say,
Miz is
that
not
doesn't mean
gonna.
the Miz is on the list, but
John Cena is very close to a lock in my mind. What about you, Callum?
I think that he's definitely high up there. Again, is a representation of a classic trait of USA, which is pretending to have been a soldier in a conflict when doing the salute and wearing the camo and dog tags. And it's like, yeah, you never saw a single bit of action. But he does have a lot of like positive traits, and he's a good representative of America. And I think that he's probably the closest thing of a like follow on from Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
But in that sense, like Rock and Austin were never really like big rah America people. Cena very much was. So yeah, I think that he's definitely a choice for that as well. Although he, especially in the latter stage of his career, he seemed to be more of a patriot for China than he was the US.
Yeah, he is somebody that I think a lot of people tapped into that Hogan type of thing, but during this type of era, where they might not have even realized that was the case, but the same people that were fully swept up in the Cena patriotism aspect of his character, rather than like the rapper aspect of his character or any of that. Those are the same people that would have been 100% behind Hogan for his entire run. That crossover is true. Can't say the same about
kids.
Yeah. Can't say the same about somebody who I think is worth talking about, but not in the same kind of way, because they just didn't approach it in the same way. But that's Kurt Angle. He wasn't.
He won a fucking gold medal for the country. I think he's in the
No,
discussion.
I would say that Kurt Angle is probably second behind Hogan in terms of
absolutely
the top patriotic guy. Like, he's an actual athlete that won something that meant something to the US.
Tony, a broken freaking neck, Tony.
But I'm saying, like, he doesn't have the same sort of gimmick in pro wrestling in that way. They tried to put him out there at first like that, but Kurt Angle, like, the medals are something that he continues to reference, and he continues to be like a part of his character. And of course, a lot of his like ring gear was like red, white, and blue. For that matter, like, American Alpha, Alpha Academy, all that stuff. Like, these people are very like American, is built into their character. But I don't think that Angle is the same type of character as like a Hogan.
No, it's definitely not. But I think that what they decided to pivot, especially in his debut, was transition away from the American hero stuff and use that as because it was a different time. It was the Attitude Era, and people weren't interested as much in this rah American crap, because that was what Hogan was doing. Well, Hogan had been doing prior to the NWO, and that was seen as old fashioned.
Yeah, I think they were interested in rah Americana, but I think they wanted it in a very blue collar packaging, like Austin, as opposed to, hey guys, eat your Wheaties and drink your milk and work out every day. And that's not what they wanted.
So they subverted it and made him into a bit more of a nerd type character. But that worked for him. But throughout all of that, he never lost the American side of him. Like, he would always, that medal theme tune, the ring gear that he would always wear, the gold medals. And whenever he turned babyface, it was all very, very American-centric. So when he was a heel, he still maintained the American stuff. Like, he would still talk about that in glowing terms, and he would do sort of things that JBL would do when there was a call for it in the negative side of things. But I think as a guy who was just always embodied, like, wanted to showcase the fact that he is an American in any shape or form, because literally you turn on, if you had never watched a Kurt Angle match before and you turn it on, he's completely covered in red, white, and blue. It's like, you're like, oh, this guy's American. Like that's the immediate thing that you would get from that. Whether he was wrestling in any place in the world, he would always be wearing that gear. So I think that he is among, if not, and probably not the most, but one of the top representatives of this is an American patriot. This is a guy who loved his country and actually achieved something for his country, which in a way is something that more than pretty much any other people we've discussed has, because like it or not, an Olympic gold medal means a lot more than a wrestling world championship.
See, Angle to me is very solid B tier, but not the A tier.
It's firmly A tier, I think.
I'll go so further. I think I can't think of anybody else worth discussing at this point. I think we've kind of...
I have two other names.
What do you have?
Now, I wouldn't rank them higher than some of the other ones, but we didn't really talk about the Patriot.
Del Wilkes put on a mask and was the Patriot and did wrestle Bret Hart in some flag matches. Beyond that, I cannot tell you much about the Patriot.
That's something to be brought up about John Cena too, is the whole like Rusev feud. Another very much driven by patriotism type of angle.
The best thing I can tell you about the Patriot is that he did the full Nelson Slam and called it the Uncle Slam, which I just think that's a good pun. But like, he's not somebody I would put anywhere, even B tier.
See, the fact that he's entirely about that makes me think that he's at least like B tier type category. He might be like just on the cusp and have to be on that C tier, but definitely not A tier.
On a list. Sting had some Americana to him. I mean, there's that, occasionally he was presented in like the feuds with Nikita Koloff, be that, surrogate Hulk Hogan. There's also the
one poster. I don't remember exactly. It might be Great American Bash or something, where he's got like the red, white, and blue face paint.
It's the amazing Great American Bash 90 face paint where he beats Flair for his first title. That is, if I was making a Mount Rushmore of patriotic wrestlers based on look alone, he'd probably be on the list, because that's one of the coolest things you could do. I would at least put him in the discussion. Wouldn't be very high, but I think there's elements of that in his character.
The other one I had down on the list that I, of course, have no intention to put down in the Mount Rushmore, but it was somebody that for a short time frame they tried to push as just like an American pride type thing. Mark Henry.
No.
They did. It was a thing.
I mean, they did. Yes, you're right. They absolutely did. But all the things he was known for.
Yeah, it was a short-lived aspect of his career because they tried to do the whole, like, the Olympian, let's have you come out with that kind of American.
Angle said no, so they said, look at the power lifter.
And, he very quickly dropped that and moved into the Nation of Domination. And then, Mark Henry never really came back around to being that type of a character. It was always more just about his strength, and for the right reason, because he wouldn't have been able to have as long of a career if he would have just been big power lifter, American pride guy. He needed to evolve. He needed to do Hall of Pain type stuff. He needed to do sexual chocolate type stuff. You know what I mean?
I don't think he needed. I just don't think he needed to give birth to that hand.
We needed it. Yeah, like Mark Henry's not a guy that I would put in the B tier even, or C tier even, I think. But he was another person that was on my list, so I just didn't want to completely ignore him. But that kind of gets us around this list. Now I'm gonna share my screen with these guys so that they can see what we've been working with, so it'll be a little bit easier for them to have this for context. Sorry for everybody that thinks that I should have that up on the screen for everybody else, but I don't have like a fancy document set up that would look nicer. So this is what we're kind of working with. We've got Hulk Hogan, Jim Duggan, Sergeant Slaughter, Dusty Rhodes, John Cena, Kurt Angle, the Patriot, Mark Henry, which is of course like no, Sting, Lacey Evans, which of course is a no, JBL, Jack Swagger, and Zeb Coulter, the Lex Express version of Lex Luger, and some other names like the Steiner Brothers and US Express and all. I would probably go, if I were going to pick the A tier and the B tier in my mind, I would probably go Hogan, Cena, Dusty, and either between Duggan and Slaughter. And then I would go B tier being Kurt Angle, the Patriot, Duggan and Slaughter. And then maybe Luger. That's how I'm kind of ranking this.
I would say Hogan, Cena, Dusty, Angle for my A tier. My B tier would be Duggan, Slaughter, Luger, and Bradshaw.
So I would probably go Hogan, Angle, Slaughter, and Dusty. And then I'd put Cena, Duggan, Lex Luger, and probably Cody was the other one.
That's right. Wearing that damn American flag on his neck.
So that's 3 votes for Hogan, Cena, and Dusty. And then there's 2 votes for Angle and Slaughter. So that's what we're working with, those 5, but with 3 of them locked. And then there's, I should have probably typed this out another way. I think that there's 2 for Angle in the B tier, 2 for Duggan in the B tier, or 3 for Duggan in the B. I think there might be 3 for Duggan in the B tier then. Because I was kind of like, well, it's Slaughter or Duggan. Patriot, Luger, JBL, Cena, Cody. That's the kind of that's that range. So it's either Angle or Slaughter gets into A tier. The other one goes into B tier. With the group again. So based off of the B tier thing and all that, you're looking at the same list that I'm looking at. We know Angle and Slaughter are A and B tier in some fashion.
Why is Cena not in the conversation?
Because there's at least 2 votes for Cena for there.
In the
Well,
two
there's
votes
also
for
2
Angle.
votes for
Oh, I
Angle
thought that.
there.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Never mind, my math is off. So Cena, Angle, Slaughter are in that that A B tier range. That's right. Let me adjust this a little bit. And then there's Cena, Angle, Slaughter in that kind of range again.
So Luger's definitely B tier because there's 3 votes for that. Duggan, there was 3 votes for B tier.
I think that there
I put
was.
him in B tier, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
And then the other ones. So then I think that would be the 8 of them, right? We're just rearranging where it would be. It would be
Yeah, I
Hogan,
believe so.
Hogan, Dusty, Cena, Angle, Slaughter, Duggan.
You need another one because
Luger.
one of Angle and Slaughter is going. 2 of Angle and Slaughter are going in the above one.
Yeah, and
So
then
I'd
it
only
would
need
just
one of
be
them.
between the Patriot, JBL, and Cody for that 8th slot.
Oh yeah.
and I already said my vote would be JBL. So
That's my vote would be
right, so-
Patriot.
So, then it would come down to
it would be the
picking
3 of
one.
us with all a separate thing. So let's wait on that one and settle on the Cena, Angle, Slaughter thing.
I think Angle won a gold medal for this country, and I think probably A tier above anything else. And then the argument for me becomes John Cena's probably done more in the name of, being a good American than Slaughter has, but Slaughter is a fucking G.I. Joe. And that counts for something.
I would go Cena, Slaughter, Angle in my ranking.
Yeah, I would go Angle, Cena, Slaughter.
So that's Angle, Cena, Slaughter. And then what would your ranking be, Callum?
Angle, Slaughter,
Cena.
Damn. Let's see. Angle, Slaughter, Cena. So we quite literally did the well, nobody has Slaughter as their number one.
Right.
On that. So that's there's something to be said there.
Rules it out.
That that kind of makes me think that it would be Cena and Angle then, even though I would go more for Slaughter. Because if Cena's a number 1, 2, and 3, Angle's a 1 and a 1 and a 3, my vote doesn't matter as much. So then that would be John Cena and then Kurt Angle in that A tier. And then B tier would be Sergeant Slaughter, Hacksaw Jim Duggan,
Lex Luger,
and then we would have to settle between Patriot, JBL, and Cody.
I don't think there's any. I think we could all agree Patriot kind of, between the three of them, did the least, even though literally he is the Patriot, didn't do much of it.
I would rank Patriot, JBL, then Cody.
I say JBL, Cody, then Patriot.
And then Callum?
Cody, Patriot, JBL.
Thanks.
Cody, Patriot, JBL. So now how do we math this out?
Well, they're all equal.
They're all
exactly the oddball position. All right.
Jeez, I guess we're just stuck on this one, huh?
I mean, we could always just do what we've done before, which is the fuck it, we're at a deadlock, so it's those three in a tie, and then whoever the other two would be are part of the C tier. We could just be like, all right, it's Patriot / JBL / Cody Rhodes, and then C tier would be Patriot / JBL / Cody Rhodes, Patriot / JBL / Cody Rhodes, and then number 3, and then number 4. So for the sake of it, let's try to figure out that C tier just so I can put that up on the list. If we're gonna go with needing 2 more people on this list, it's a little tough. I mean, there's an argument for Sting. There's an argument for Swagger. Could just put the 2 U.S. Express.
American.
I mean, he did call himself the All-American American. Yeah, I would go Swagger. Because for a little bit, he was the babyface too. We the People and all that. Yeah. I'd go Jack Swagger. And then the 4th, I don't know. Maybe the U.S. Express as a tag team and just say, call it a day. More so than Lacey.
Yeah, definitely.
Any suggestions, Callum?
I mean, I've lost care at this point, so you put whatever you want.
What do you think, Rob? U.S. Express and Jack Swagger?
I can live with that, yeah.
All right, well then there you go. There's our A tier. Let's backtrack it. Our C tier is U.S. Express, Jack Swagger, and then 2 out of Patriot, JBL, and Cody Rhodes. Whoever moves on above them is a part of the B tier with the Lex Express version of Lex Luger, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Sergeant Slaughter. The A tier being Kurt Angle, John Cena, Dusty Rhodes, and Hulk Hogan.
And that A tier looks pretty good.
I think that's about as definitive of a list as you could possibly get. But of course,
like America, we were divided, and I think that's really what this whole boils down to.
Even though it shouldn't, because it's supposed to be a United States. But is that not America? We're supposed to be united, and we're so divided.
That is true.
Although when it all comes crashing down and it hurts inside, leave your comments below. Tell us what you agree with or disagree with, whether you think certain people should be shifted around on the list, or if we're forgetting somebody. It might be the case too. I don't think that we're forgetting anybody, but maybe we are. Then open up that discussion for future debates or something. Maybe if we get enough of that, we'll talk about it on the hot tags and just kind of go, you know what, in retrospect, we'll change this to whatever or something. That's up to you. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure that you are clicking around on all that good stuff over on Smark Out Moment. Make sure you're following us on Facebook and Twitter, at least as much as those Twitter accounts are still up. Make sure you're going over to fanboysanonymous.com. Go back and check out the American Pride USA 4th of July type theme that we did way back many years ago for the For Real Movie Club back on there. We had watched I think it was The Patriot with Mel Gibson. We watched Invasion USA, this god-awful Chuck Norris movie, which was hilarious. And I'm blanking on what the other two were. I think Air Force One might have been one of them. And we try to look that up real quick. American Pride for Real Movie Club was... All right, The Patriot, Invasion USA, Air Force One, and Team America.
America.
Fuck yeah. That is way more of the best movie out of that group. But that's old. That's from 2014. God, that was that long ago. Ooh, I hate it. That's over on fanboysanonymous.com. Of course, check out things like the Blueprint Project. There's not really a whole lot of super duper American Pride stuff when it comes to that, especially because even Superman, I am going with the, instead of Truth, Justice, and the American Way, I'm going more for Truth, Justice, and a Better Tomorrow version of Superman. But hey, I'll throw in some American Pride stuff there when Lex Luger becomes president. Shh, I shouldn't talk about that. Anyway, the whole thing with that is up there. Of course, Batman, A Nighttime Story, 100 records from the Wayne Foundation Archives. Show your support for that. Show your support for Absolute Power Rangers and Mighty Morphin Epic. And of course, just continue clicking around here. I've said, of course, again, I'll come back around to that. Make sure you are following everything that you can find under amangotree.com. Click on all my accounts at Tony, Mango, and elsewhere. Stay tuned for things like maybe more activity on Blue Sky. I don't know. Maybe threads on Instagram. Ugh. But if you're clicking on that stuff and you're following my stuff, you should follow Caleb and you should follow Rob.
Yeah, I am on Blue Sky. I am on Twitter. I'm on Twitch. I'm on Instagram at Duke Felice for all of them. I'm also at Duke Felice on YouTube for whenever I want to jumpstart that channel. Maybe I'll get on Threads. I just found out about that like 20 minutes ago. Maybe I'll get on Spill. Who knows?
Spill? I don't even know that one.
Yeah, there's so many of these clones popping up. But for now, you can find me here and on Fightful and on WrestleZone. And that's where it really matters because that's where I feel the most support. Callum?
You can find me on Twitter at Wigmeister14. Check out the Power Rankings over on smartcamo.com, my weekly contribution that goes out every Saturday. And you can find the Fantasy League over at www.fantasyleague.com as well as through the Smart Camo website where you can see how our teams are doing with the updates that have been made. Actually, I might as well just update on that as well because some changes have been made. Since our discussion on Money in the Bank, Rob has added Sheamus to his team.
Better win.
Yeah, in the hope that he wins the United States Championship from Austin Theory. But as long as somebody wins the title from Austin Theory, I'm happy at this point. And Tony also decided to ditch Rey Mysterio and replace him with somebody whose name is escaping me right now.
Damian Priest, was it?
No, Damian Priest was added as just part of his, just the person that was going to be added to it.
Isn't it
LA
Knight?
That's it. Yeah, LA Knight. So Tony no longer has Rey Mysterio, he has LA Knight instead. And you can all say yeah for that.
Yeah.
I want a lot of yeah and not many. Nah. Yeah, of course, the Fanboys Anonymous, the Fantasy League stuff, you can find over at wwefantasyleague.com. We'll talk about maybe that a little bit more on the Darkcast, which is coming up when we possibly record that right after this. I don't know. Might be posted tomorrow. Might be posted later on this week. At some point, it'll be up there. If you are on the Darkcast here over on the YouTube channel membership or on the Patreon, then you'll be able to check it out. And until then, we are done with this episode of Mount Rushmore. So thank you for listening to this. Stay tuned for the next episode you see on here. And adios. This has been another Smark Out moment, and we're being counted out.